Here we go. Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Sotah daf Kafchet. We are at the bottom of Kaf Zayin Amud Bet. We are at the Gemara. Let's just remind ourselves some of what we did in the Mishnah, which we ended with yesterday. It's an interesting situation. It's one Mishnah for the entire parak. You even have two dots in the Mishnah a couple of places because it's actually, I think, four Mishnayos in if you look in a sefer of Mishnayos, but it's all been combined together into one very long Mishnah here in the beginning of the fifth parak of Sotah. And so let me share my screen. And what did we talk about? So the first thing that we learned in that Mishnah is the fact that we said that just as the Sotah waters test the woman, they also test the man. Now, what we didn't say is which man is it testing? And so that's how we're going to begin. And we pick up with the very bottom of the last line on Kaf Zayin Amud Bet, very bottom of Kaf Zayin Amud Bet, where it says Gemara. That's where we're picking up. So Oto Laman, who is that Oto? Who is that him that is being referred to? If you want to say that it's actually that when we test the wife, we're also testing the husband. Baal my Ovid, what did he do that we need to test him? And if you want to say that actually what he did wrong is the ispe avon bodkele maya, that if he sinned, then the waters are testing him. And Rashi says, top line of Rashi, so there you go, we got a Rashi. Top line of Rashi on Kafchet Amud Aleph, sheba aleha la'achar shenistera, that he had relationship with his wife after she had been secluded, and so with the other man. And so we know that that's actually prohibited. So that's what the water may be testing him about. Now, of course, the question is what kind of result? Is he supposed to die as a result of that? That seems like a little bit much, but it could be that he just has negative effects on him. Obviously, that's only one read. Another read could be that did he engage in any kind of marital infidelity that would result in some kind of punishment, meaning did he have relations with somebody that he wasn't supposed to? And that's what it's testing him about. But in any event, and that's actually the Rambam, because we'll see later on that if he does anything wrong, actually we're going to see it in about 2 seconds, that if he does anything wrong, then the waters don't test his wife. And so what do we, when we explain what do we mean by if he did anything wrong, we explain that according to the Rambam, that means any kind of sin of forbidden relations. And so if that's the case, so that might be the case here as well. So in any event, so maybe it's going to test him on that front. Well, ki isbe avom b'didei mi b'dake la maya dida. Well, 1 second. If he has a sin, then is the water going to actually test him? Because v'hatanya, we learned in a brisa, v'nikah ish me'avon v'isham hahi tisa es avona, that the man will be pure of sin, and the woman, she will bear her sin. Well, 1 second, why in the world does this pasuk, which is in the course of the discussion of the Sotah, why in the world does it have to talk about the man being innocent, the husband being innocent? Of course he's innocent. The only person who's suspected here is the wife. So what does that mean? So it teaches that bismansha ish menuka me'avon hamayim bodkin es ha'isha, that it's only when the man himself is also clear from sin that the waters test the wife. Well, 1 second. If the waters only test the so and bisman ein ha'ish menuka, if the man is me'avon, if the man is not pure from sin, so ein habayim bodkin es ishto, the waters won't test the wife. So therefore, if in fact the waters are not going to test the wife if he's got any sin, well, then obviously it can't be referring to him who's being, when we say oto, that can't refer to the husband, because if it was referring to the husband, how would it test him? Because it doesn't test both of them, because if in fact he has sinned, well, then the waters don't do anything. So now one could say that that's precisely the answer, meaning that it is testing him, that he now knows that his wife did something, but she's not being punished because it's of his sin. But in any event, the Gemara is suggesting, and of course our Mishnah suggested, that both of them would be tested at the same time. And so if in fact he has sinned, they're not both being tested at the same time. Only he would be tested, because it doesn't make a difference whether she sinned or not. She's not going to, the waters aren't going to work for her. So Ella Laboel. So rather it's got to be that it's her potential partner, that the person that he is suspicious that she may have been with. So that's who's going to be tested. So listen, Kidakatani Seifa. Well, 1 second. Why did you use the word oto in the Mishnah? In the oto implies him without being specific, but we know how to be specific to refer to the potential adulterer, because kashem shasura labal kachasura laboel. We actually use the term Baal and Boel in the end of the Mishnah, so or later on in the Mishnah. So as a result, we know how to say adulterer. So why didn't we say the word adulterer explicitly? Well, la'olam lavoel. So really, it does mean the adulterer. V'reisha, and when we had in the beginning of our Mishnah that we used the word oto, Aidi ditana ota, tani ota, oto, that we used a parallel language, that the language of our Mishnah referred to her as ota. So as a result, it refers to him, even though it's the adulterer, as oto. And Seifa, and when it comes to the end of the Mishnah, Aidi de Tani Baal, Tana Boel. So because we call the husband, so now we're going to call the other guy Boel, the one who had relations, and so the adulterer. And so as a result, that's how we get to it. And so the bottom line is that when the woman drinks, not only is there a miracle that if she sinned, she's going to die, but if she sinned, the person that she sinned with will die as well. So, truly a remarkable miracle. And at the same time, a method of enabling a husband to become close again with his wife, and feel that they can re-enter a state of trust, hopefully. Okay. All right. So now, what was the basis for this learning that it affects both the woman and the adulterer? Because it repeats uva'u uva'u. Now, when we said that, we have a question. Ibailahu. The Gemara wonders. Ba'u uva'u kamar. Uva'u kamar. Well, let's understand and unpack the question. The question is the following. The word uva'u it appears 3 separate times in the Parsha of Sotah. It appears in Perek Pasuk. Let me just make sure I get all the Pasukim right. It appears in Perek Kafbet, Perek Pasuk Kafbet, Perek Pasuk Kafdalit, and Perek Pasuk Kaf Zayin. So now when we say this, are we saying that it's the repetition of the word uva'u that is teaching us that both the husband and that both the wife, the woman, and the potential adulterer are tested? Or is it the fact that we have 2 different lessons? It could have just said ba'u, they come. But why does it say uva'u, and they came, which suggests an additional person? Well, according to Rabbi Akiva, who we will see will learn things from an extra letter vav. So maybe those are the 2 people that we have. First is the fact that we have the word ba'u in the first place, and the second is the fact that it has the vav in front of it. And so the question is are we learning it from the repetition of the word uva'u? Or are we learning it all from one reference to uva'u, and the fact that it could have just said ba'u, and the fact that it said ba'u and uva'u meaning all added the vav to it, that's what we're learning 2 lessons from. So Tashma, how do we know? Come in here, take a look at the rest of this Mishnah. Kashem she'asur lebal, kach asur leboel. That when we said that not only is she prohibited so first we said that she's tested for both, and that's based on uvo. And then we say that she's she's prohibited both to her husband and to the adulterer. That's based on the repetition of the word nitma, because shenamar nitma v'nitma. So that seems to be that we're saying that it could have just written the word nitma without a vav, and now it says the word v'nitma. So we're learning 2 lessons. Well, 1 second, but we still have a question, because where do you put the quotes? This is a classic. This is a classic, right? Because you could say, when it says nitma v'nitma, right? Does it mean nitma in quotes, the nitma in quotes, meaning is it the repetition of the word nitma without the vav? Or does it mean that you could have just said nitma without a vav, and then nitma is also all in quotes, including the vav, and it's saying nitma, we didn't need the vav in the pasuk, and the addition of the vav teaches us a second lesson. So it's still unclear. So nitma kamar, nitma nitma kamar, meaning what exactly are you trying to say? So tashma medikatani seifa. No. We can figure it out, because what do we have in the second piece? Because Rebbe says, Shnei pa'amim ha'amurim beparsha nitma'a v'nitma. That there are 2 times that it says the word nitma. Once it says the word nitma, and the second time it says the word v'nitma. And so it's not a single word, it's 2 separate mentions. And so echad lebal ve'echad leboel. And again, Rebbe teaches the same thing, same basic principle, but it's based on the repetition of the entire word and not just the additional vav. So miklal, what do we understand from this? Because of course Rebbe is disagreeing with Rabbi Akiva. Miklal de Rabbi Akiva vave kadarish. Rabbi Akiva must be learning from the letter vav, and so as a result, what we're saying is it's not the fact that the whole word is repeated, it's the fact that the Torah chose to write the word with a vav at the beginning. And so the vav at the beginning allows us to teach a second lesson from the repetition from that word. So that's the story. So, okay, so Hilkach, now that we know that the word uva'u is really teaching us 2 lessons, because it could have just said ba'u, but instead it said uva'u, so that's 2 lessons. And remember again that the word uva'u is repeated 3 times. So Hilkach, as a result, l'Rebbe Akiva shita kroi ksive. We have 6 total references that we can learn from, because it says ba'u 3 times, and each of those times it has a vav in front of it, so we can learn 3 lessons from the repetition of the word and 3 lessons from the additional vav. That's a total for 6. So what do we learn from all 6 times? So here we go. So the first time that we're learning it is once for the command of God for the water to be bitter for her, and once for the water to be bitter for him. And that's from Pasuk Parakeh, Pasuk Kav Dalet. Even though this is the second reference, it's the first one that we're talking about, because it says, if we take a look in the side here, what does it say? It says, Uva'u va hamayim, that the water comes into her, ham'ararim, which is bitter, limarim, in order to cause bitterness. So the point is that that's the lesson number 1. God is commanding that the water should work on her. So, or commanding that the water will be bitter for her. So now that's number 1. Yeah, it's not good, because if she sins, she's going to die. So that's the first pair.
That water,
because she was with a man that she wasn't supposed to be with, and so her husband is suspicious. So now, once we have that there's a command for the water to work, we also need that the water actually worked. And so that is Perek Hey Pasuk Kav Zayin, where it says V'tzavta Vitna V'nafla Yerecha. Right in that pasuk, it says that her stomach shall fall, her stomach shall distend, and her thigh shall fall. And so that is how we know that it's going to work. And then the third set is the very beginning, the first one that we talk about. That's the first one that's actually in the Chumash. Chad lidia dida, v'chad lidia didei. And once is to tell, so the final one is to tell you the order of the water working. Because when the Kohen gives her the curse, the Kohen is going to reference her thigh before it references her stomach, because again, the thigh is considered the place where she actually did the sin. So we want to reference that place first. But when she actually drinks the water, that it's going to affect her stomach first. So we need the Torah to tell us that it's going to affect the stomach first, so that nobody is suspicious that even though it did the work, then maybe it was some other cause that caused the problem. And so as a result, we have the third case of informing us of the order. So for Rebbe, so now what about Rebbe? Because Rebbe doesn't learn from the Vav in the beginning, so he only has 3 lessons to learn. What does he learn? So Rebbe, we only have 3 times, and 1 time for each. Chad l'tzava'ah, chad l'asiyah, v'chad l'vidiyah. Again, once for God to command that the waters work, once to tell us that the waters do work, and once to tell us the order. So, but 1 second, and of course, all 3 refer to her. Well, if that's true, how do we get any reference to him? The Rebbe kashem shamayim bod kimotah, kach bod kinotah minalei. Well, 1 second, how does Rebbe know that just as the waters test her, they test him as well? So nafkalei meditanya, we have a brisa that teaches us latzbot beten v'lan pil yarich, that when it comes to pasuk kaf bet, this is the first reference to uvau, that in that pasuk it refers to beten and yerech in a non-gendered manner. It only says stomach and thigh. So therefore, bitno virecho shel boel, and this is referring not to the stomach and thigh of the woman, but rather the stomach and thigh of the man. So ata omer bitno virecho shel boel, oenu ela bitna virecha shel niveles. Well, 1 second, how do you know that? Maybe it's actually referring to her stomach and thigh. Kishahu omer bitsavsa bitna v'nafla yerecha, hare bitna virecha shel niveles kam amor. Well, 1 second, when it goes to pasuk kav zayin, it specifically refers to vitna with a mapik hey, telling us her stomach, and yerecha with a mapik hey, telling us her thigh. So as a result, since we have a different pasuk that is very clear that it refers to her thigh and stomach, well, so we know that the Torah knows how to tell us that. So from the fact that it chose not to tell us that with respect to bet and yerech in pasuk kaf bet, so that tells us that in fact it must refer to him. Umani mekayem latzabot beten v'lanpil yerech. So as a result, what do I do with the fact that it refers to beten and yerech? So bitno virecho shel boel. So it teaches us that it applies to the man as well. So we have the 3 references according to Rebbe Akiva. We have 6 references because we've got 3 uba'us, and the uba'us didn't have to have a vav in front, so we can learn everything from the uva. But Rebbe says, no, we only have 3 sources to learn from because he doesn't learn from the Vav. So we just have the 3 repetitions of Uvau. And so as a result, that tells us that it works, that it's commanded to work, that it actually works, and that it gives us the order. And so as a result, we need to connect the man and the woman. And so as a result, we connect the man and the woman through the reference to Yerech and beten, and that it also works for him. And just as it works for her, it'll work for him. The idach. So now Rabbi Akiva, what does he do with the whole reference to yerech and beten? Why does it just specifically mention those without a gender? Sahu demoda la kohen de beten beresha v'hadar yarech. No, that's to tell us, it's that pasuk that's telling us, meaning that's where we get the fact that the stomach is going to happen first and then the thigh. Shelo lahotzi laz ala mayim amarim, so that you don't have people saying lashon hara, that's people speaking ill of the waters, because when the Kohen gives the curse, he's going to mention the thigh first, and yet her stomach is actually going to have the water is going to have an effect on the stomach first. So we need some source to point to explain to everybody, yes, this is in fact how it's supposed to work. And so, but now the idach, well, 1 second, how does Rebbe come to explain the order? If he's using beten and yerech to teach the concept that it applies to the man, the adulterer man, as well as the woman, how does he learn about the order? Well, im kain lichtov kra bitna virecha, because if that was the only purpose, then if the order was what was key, it could have just said her thigh and her stomach and her thigh. My beten v'yarech. Why did it specifically say stomach and thigh without adding the pronoun? So shma mina leboel. So we learn two things. We learn one, that it applies that the order is stomach and then the thigh, and we learn that it applies that just as it tests the woman, it tests the man. Well, 1 second, maybe it's only to tell us about the order and not to tell us about the man. Im kain, or maybe it's only to tell us about the man and not to tell us about the order. So im kain lichtov bitno virecho. Well, look, if it's only supposed to tell us about the order, about the man, well, the Torah could have said his thigh and his stomach. Again, the fact that it was chosen to be generic, my beten v'yarech, shma mina tarki. So we learn both concepts. So again, we learn from according to Rebbe, we have 3 references to Bo. We have the reference to Yerech and Beten to tell us that it also applies to him. And we have the order of Beten and then Yerech to tell us that the stomach is the thing that's affected first. So we've got a way to learn the lessons, both according to Rabbi Akiva and according to Rebbe. So the disagreement is only on how we learn the lesson, not on what the actual law would be. Okay. Now, the next piece in our Mishnah is we noted 2 potential ways to learn that the woman is prohibited both to her husband and to the adulterer. Again, and it's very similar to the whole concept of uvo, right? When it came to Rabbi Akiva, he said uva'u teaches us 2 things because we have the word ba'u and we add the letter vav in front. Well, similarly, Rabbi Akiva said that we had the word nitma'a and we have the word vin nitma'a. And so as a result, we learned 2 lessons. And Rebbe says, no, you don't learn the lesson from the vav. You learn the lesson from the fact that one time it says the word nitma'a, and then another time it says the word vinitma'a. So the bottom line is that we are learning lessons from the word nitma'a. So now we're going to cite a brisa that considers additional lessons, because it turns out that the word nitma'a is actually repeated 3 times. So let's take a look. So Amar Rabbi Yeshua Kach Hayadorish Zachariah, that in fact, not only did Rabbi Akiva teach that way about uvau and vinitma'a, but also Zachariah ben Akatzav also taught that way. But we had Rebbe have a disagreement, and now we quote the brisa. Tana Rabbanim, the rabbis taught in a brisa, Shalosh pa'amim ha'amurim beparsha im nitma'a vinitma'a. Lama. So we have 3 references in the Torah to the word nitma. Once in pasuk Yudalid, once in pasuk Kav and once in pasuk Kavtet. So why all 3? So echad lebaal, one to tell you that she is considered tameh and defiled for her husband, meaning that they're not allowed to have relations. Ve'echad leboel, and one to tell you that even if she never drinks, right? If she never drinks the water, and the husband dies, she is not allowed to marry the suspicious adulterer because she was never tested, so we don't know whether or not she had the extramarital affair. And if she did have the extramarital affair, she was supposed to die through the drinking of the water. And the bottom line is you're not allowed to if one were to have an extramarital affair, one's not allowed to marry that person. Essentially, the Torah punishes that person from interfering, and so that's why the person's not allowed. The truma, and the third prohibition of nitma is that she is not allowed to eat truma any longer. Meaning, if she were the daughter of a Kohen and she were married to a Kohen, she would not be allowed to eat truma at this point because she was defiled. So she's potentially defiled. So we treat her as if she is one who was definitely defiled, and we will say that she cannot eat truma. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Rabbi Yishmael says in this brisa, and now interestingly, what we're going to see is this statement does not actually affirmatively disagree with any statement of Rabbi Akiva. It seems to be adding, and we're going to ask that question and discuss that tomorrow. But Kal v'chomer, we have a Kal v'chomer. Uma grusha shumuteres l'truma asur l'kahuna. When it comes to a divorcee, she's allowed to eat truma, meaning if a woman is the daughter of a Kohen and she marries somebody and now she gets divorced, goes back, assuming that she has no children, she goes back to her father's house and she's allowed to eat truma in her father's house. But yet, asura l'kahuna, she's not allowed to marry a Kohen. Well, this woman who is a Sotah, shasura b'truma, she's not allowed to eat truma. Eino din shasura l'kahuna. Well, then shouldn't she certainly be prohibited to marry a Kohen? So that is the main part of the brisa, and then the brisa continues. Uma Talmud lomer v'hi nitma v'hi lo nitma. Well, in one of the psukim that we cited, specifically pasuk Yudalid, it says both that she was defiled or that she was not defiled. To read the pasuk in full, it says va'avar alav ruach kina, right? So he has a sense of jealousy. The kineas ishto, and he now warns his wife at v'hi nitma, and she becomes defiled. O avar alav ruach kina, the kineas ishto v'hi lo nitma. Or alternatively, he has a spirit of jealousy and he warns his wife and she did not become tamei. So what is it, right? So which is it? Im nitma lama shosa. If in fact we all know that she had the affair and she is tamei and she is defiled, so why should she be drinking? Because we know that you're not supposed to drink if we know that she did it. Meaning if there were witnesses to the act. Indeed, the witnesses to the act would say that she would have to be stoned. If she was warned. Lama mashka. And if she didn't actually do anything, well, then why should she actually have to drink it all? So magid l'cha kasav shasafik asura. So the pasuk is actually telling us that we're talking about a case of uncertainty. And Rashi helps us out in the first of the wide lines in Rashi near the bottom of the page. So magid l'cha kasav sha'al safek asura v'halkikam kra. This is what the pasuk is telling us. Isha zu, this woman, shema nitma shema lo nitma. Maybe she became tamei and maybe she didn't. The ka'amar lacha, and so that's why it's telling us the yishkana that we're going to give her to drink. Libarer hasveka, in order to clarify the uncertainty. The lo mashka la asura, and if in fact the woman is not given to drink, well then she will be prohibited to her husband. So that is what the brisa says. So mikan atadan l'sheretz. So the brisa continues that we can learn from this, from the fact that we're treating this woman there's an uncertainty about her, that we're treating her as if she was actually defiled, right? Because even though there's uncertainty, we're going to say that she's not allowed to be with her husband. Well, why should we do that? It's only an uncertain case. So mikana tadan. So we basically have said we're going to treat her like that because that's what the Torah tells us to do. So mikana tadan l'sheretz. We can learn a similar application to impurity that comes from a sheretz, from a creepy crawly animal. Ma sotah shelo asa ba shogeg kamezid. But when it comes to, because what do we have? How do we get that we should certainly apply this? Because look at the sotah. When it comes to the sotah, we don't treat if she did it unintentionally as if she did it intentionally. And Rashi explains what va'onis karatzon, and we don't treat an onus situation if she was if she did it without against her will, like a situation where she did it with her will. And let's take a look and see what Rashi explains. Mikanata lamad kal v'chomer. We can learn from this whole story a kal v'chomer. Safek naga b'taharot, safek lo naga. In a situation where we're unsure whether this creepy crawly thing touched something that was tahor. Kinan la betuma misafek, that in a certain situation we are just as the woman, we're treating her as if she was tameh, even though it's uncertain. So too, we're going to treat this object that may have become tameh as definitely tameh, even though we're uncertain. So what is the concept? So sotah lo asaba. So when it comes to a sotah, we treat a shogeg different from mazid and an onus different from ratzon. What are those cases? Diksiv vihi lonis pasa, right? The Torah itself tells us that she was not forced, she was not raped. So asura, that's when she's asur. Panis pasa, if in fact she had been raped, muteris, she would not be prohibited. V'huadin l'shogeg. And similarly, if this was all based on some kind of mistaken identity, ishto ve'eshes ish imo b'bayit, that if you have his wife and the wife of another man in a house, v'niskaven le'ishto, and he intended to have relations with his wife, v'nizdam lo zu, and instead it turned out that he had relations with the other one. And similarly, she also thought that it was her husband, that she thought it was her husband. In that situation, there's no prohibition. So if you have two couples staying together and they each think that they're having relations with their spouse because it's dark, but it turns out they're having relations with the other spouse, well, then neither of them are going to be prohibited to one another. Unless, of course, we are dealing with a Kohen, but that's not the case that we're talking about here. So, okay, so now that we said all that, so the point is that when it comes to the sotah, we treat shogeg different from mazid and onus different from ratzon. But when it comes to asa, and yet asa basofik kivadai, we make the uncertain case as if it was certain, because we're treating her as if she definitely had an illegal affair. Well, sheretz, she'asabo shogeg kamezid v'onis karatzon. When it comes to a mug or something else, and we're questioning whether it became tameh, and it doesn't make a difference whether the sheretz touched the cup voluntarily, with its will, without its will, intentionally, unintentionally, that doesn't matter. If it touched it, it touched it. So so then certainly in such a situation, eino din sheyasebo safek kivadai. In that certain situation, we should certainly treat an uncertain contact like a case of certain contact. And so as a result, now we know that we are going to have this rule. However, because we learned this rule from sotah, certain of the limitations that are associated with sotah are going to apply to the tuma case. Umimakom shabata, from the fact that we learned from the place that you came, meaning the sotah, we have to learn other rules or other limitations on this rule. Ma Sotah Rishus HaYachid. Because when a Sotah becomes a Sotah, what must have happened? She must have been secluded in a private place. So what's our definition of a private place? It's a Rishus HaYachid. So in a Rishus HaYachid, so that's where this could happen. So Af Sheretz Rishus HaYachid. So too, when it comes to a Sheretz, when we say that an uncertainty is like a certainty, it's only in a private place. So Umas Sotah Davar Sheyesh Bo Das Lishael. And similarly, when we deal with a case of uncertainty, there's somebody to ask. We can talk to her and ask her, did you have this affair or did you not? So Af Sheretz Davar Sheyesh Bo Das Lishael. Also, similarly, when we have the situation of a sheretz, there needs to be somebody that we can ask whether or not it actually happened. And then there's an uncertainty. But if we have no idea, well, then we're not going to treat it as an uncertainty. So Mikan Amru, so from here we say, Davar Sheyesh Bo Das Lishael Birshos Hayachid Sveiko Tame. So when you have something there's somebody to ask, then and we are uncertain, even though there's somebody to ask, we don't know what actually happened. So then that will be a situation where we say that because there was possible contact and it was in Rishus HaYachid, we'll say that the person or thing is Tameh. B'Rishus HaRabim. But if it was in Rishus HaRabim, so then Sveiko Tahor. Then we would say that even though it's uncertain, we're going to say it's tahor. And similarly, v'she'ein bo das l'shoel, if there's nobody to ask about it, bein b'rshus hayachid, bein b'rshus harabim, sveiko tahor. If there's nobody to ask, well, then we don't have we're not going to say that there's a suffix situation in the first place. And so as a result, we're going to say that it is that because whether it's in a private domain or a public domain, then even though it could have been tameh, we're going to say that it's tahor because there's nobody for us to ask about it. So that's the end of the brisa. And now what we're going to do tomorrow, we're going to begin again. We still need to understand, why did Rabbi Yishmael raise the concept of marrying a Kohen when Rabbi Akiva had not mentioned it? So for that, God willing, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf, and we will pick up with the third to last line of Kavchet Amabet, God willing.
How's the weather tomorrow, David?
The weather tomorrow, I don't know about the weather tomorrow, but we can look out and look for it and see what it is after we close the session. Have a great day, everybody.
Look for tonight's weather.